On the morning of October 6th, 1965, Sandy Koufax was the best pitcher in the entire history of Major League Baseball. And he might have still been at his highest point of dominance. He just struck out the most hitters of a season of anyone this century. He pitched a perfect game less than a month ago, the fourth no-hitter or perfect game of his career. He pitched the most, won the most, and dominated the most of any baseball pitcher on the entire planet. And he led the Los Angeles Dodgers to another World Series appearance that season. October 6, 1965 was the day of Game 1 of the 1965 World Series between the Dodgers and Minnesota Twins. Koufax was not the pitcher for the Dodgers that day. By choice. He willingly sat out of Game 1 of the World Series. The best pitcher ever, still at the peak of his powers. Why? Well, for reasons much bigger than baseball. Koufax not being on the mound during what at the time was the Dodgers' biggest game of the season stunned the media, especially because he made the conscious, intentional choice not to be there. So, where was he, if not the pitcher's mound? 17-year-old Daniel Schnoff and his family were running late to a synagogue that day in St. Paul, Minnesota. They were late to prayer on this day and had to find seats much more towards the back than usual, which, to a 17-year-old boy, was one of the best things that could have ever happened to him. Because right here, at a synagogue in Minnesota on the day of Game 1 of the World Series, the best pitcher in the world sat down one row in front of him to pray. Daniel Schnoff and Sandy Koufax looked at each other, nodded in acknowledgement, and went about their prayer. See, Sandy Koufax is Jewish, and he has a tremendous appreciation for his culture. His grandfather was a Jewish immigrant to the United States who raised him on Jewish principles and showcasing the culture to him from a young age. While Koufax is not a deeply devout religious person, he knew, understood, and was proud of the culture he came from. He actively did everything he could to soak in his roots more than anything else. And on this day, the day of what could have been one of the biggest games of his life, it was also the holiest day of the year for the Jewish community. Yom Kippur is a day of repentance and atonement for sin, involving primarily fasting and lengthy prayer that falls somewhere in the late September, early October timeframe. Hence why Koufax was at a synagogue and not blowing fastballs by the Minnesota Twins hitters. It was not unprecedented for Jewish baseball players, including Koufax himself, to step away from their teams to observe important Jewish holidays. Observers of Yom Kippur are actually not supposed to work at all on Yom Kippur, but more often than not in baseball, they do. Here, let me paint you an example of how this typically goes. Yom Kippur 2019. Two prominent Jewish players in baseball, Max Fried and Jock Peterson, have winner-take-all playoff games on this day. Fried gets shelled in his inning and a third, and the Atlanta Braves lose by 12 runs. Peterson's Dodgers also lose to the Washington Nationals and have their season end. 54 years after Koufax's Dodgers had a World Series to start. But sometimes, Jewish MLB legends did take off for significant Jewish holidays. Hank Greenberg, the first Jewish player inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, once took Yom Kippur off during a heated pennant race and received praise for sticking by his beliefs before baseball, even receiving a standing ovation in his synagogue, which made him extremely uncomfortable due to Yom Kippur's very, very serious meaning. In 1959, Koufax didn't pitch in a game that fell on Rosh Hashanah, the start of the Jewish New Year. But in 1959, Koufax was in no way, shape, or form the pitcher he wound up becoming. In 1959, he was 5% above MLB average at preventing the other team from scoring. Again, in 1965, he was the best pitcher baseball had ever seen. He took off to observe Rosh Hashanah in 1961 and 1963 as well. Neither of those years did this personally overlap with baseball for him, though. So to anyone who paid attention to Koufax's career, it shouldn't have been a surprise at all that he was going to prioritize his culture over throwing a round white ball from a small dirt hill. But it seems that the media and the powers that be didn't. And we'll go over just how bizarrely this situation was handled by everyone else right after a quick word from today's sponsor. This video is brought to you by Arena Club. Are you looking to buy, sell, or trade cards? Arena Club is changing the hobby. With their original slab packs and no-fee auctions, whether you're chasing grails or flipping slabs, Arena Club makes it easy to collect the cards you love. With slab packs, you can rip a pack for as low as $25 and hit on a card worth tens of thousands of dollars. Every pack has grails that are at least 20 times the price of the pack. Arena Club is the most trusted name in the game. They offer full transparency, showing you the odds of every card before you buy. In my most recent pull, I got a Nolan Ryan card, which taught me that I don't dress as well as I thought I did. From your digital showroom, you can trade, sell, auction, or retrieve a physical card. It's the future of trading cards, combining great childhood vibes and modern technology. Right now, you can get 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/SRS and use code SRS. Thank you, Arena Club. When MLB announced the date of Game 1 of the World Series in early September, the Dodgers were tied for first place. There were no playoffs at this time, other than the World Series, so they had to have known the Dodgers had a good chance to be in that World Series. And logically, if the Dodgers are in the World Series, you'd have to imagine Sandy Koufax would pitch for them, as long as his left arm was connected to his body. If it were literally any other day. MLB either didn't think that through, or didn't care, opening themselves up to this controversy at the expense of one of their brightest faces. And yes, this was controversial. His decision to skip the World Series was premeditated. Given the nearly months-long notice by MLB on what the date of this game would be, Koufax really took his time thinking this through. He spoke to rabbis to educate himself on how to properly go about the situation, and said from the get-go, "If I'm told it isn't proper to pitch, then I won't, because I wouldn't feel right about it." He even said he'd rather it just rained on the day of Game 1 to solve the problem for him. But alas, no rain, and no Sandy for the Dodgers. Which then made it that simple. An easy, non-negotiable that he would prioritize respecting his culture over his work. And that sparked intense debate and widespread media attention. A common criticism was that he was, quote, quitting on his team by not being there during the World Series. It took the Dodgers owner, who was Catholic, by the way, jumping out in front of the situation, telling the media that the Dodgers were completely behind Sandy doing this, to even kind of quell the media uproar about this, saying he straight up would not allow Sandy to pitch if it helped him feel less guilty about honoring his code above all else. Which, power to a team owner in 1965 having the empathy for his star player to be unequivocally on his side here. But more than anything else, I think they just didn't understand. With Jewish culture being in the minority in the US, most baseball fans and media presences didn't seem to comprehend how a holiday they knew nothing about and didn't celebrate could possibly trump Game 1 of the World Series for the best pitcher ever at that time, not realizing that if Koufax worked at McDonald's and wanted to take a day off to honor the holiest day in one of the world's largest faiths, they'd probably not think twice about it. It's just that Koufax's job was Major League Baseball pitcher, and not burger flipper. I'm not Jewish, nor am I a person who considers themselves religious, but I've always been very moved by Koufax doing this in the first place. It takes a very admirable sense of will and personal code to stick to your beliefs that strongly in the face of the masses simply not understanding. Thankfully, those who knew him really well could not have been more supportive. Well, except one isolated, one-off, somewhat harmless joke we do know about. Instead of Koufax, Don Drysdale started Game 1 of the World Series for the Dodgers, and got completely shelled. As Drysdale left the mound after getting rocked by the Twins lineup in the game Koufax would have started on any other day, he quipped to the Dodgers manager, "I bet you wish I was Jewish too." Other than that comment, which I guess you could maybe perceive as a slight stray in Sandy's direction, every piece of evidence we have suggests that his teammates totally had his back. Teammate Claude Osteen said that Sandy was such a star that if this was his own choice, then it was okay. Adding that his teammates respected his religion and his beliefs above all else. I think he earned that grace from his peers through years of how he carried himself, to all his teammates. He would sit with Dodgers shortstop Maury Wills, who was black, and sort through each other's mail, discarding the racist or anti-Semitic mail for one another. There's a large paper trail out there of Dodger teammates and staff praising how willing he was to hang out publicly with racial minorities around the Dodgers in a less progressive time in our history, realizing that he did this because he cared and understood them. He was a minority, just like them, in a lot of ways. His teammates endearingly, yet rather misguidedly, called him Super Jew, so teammates who knew him well and understood how authentic and true to himself he was, knew this was truly more important to him than pitching. Nobody said a word. Nobody thought a bad thing about him, said Wes Parker, the Dodger first baseman. We respected him because he was doing it because of his religion. He was being true to himself. Dodgers second baseman Jim Lefebvre added, "Whatever Sandy wanted to do, we were all on board." He returned to the Dodgers before Game 2 of the series to take the mound, and while he pitched well, he wasn't Koufax-esque, and the Dodgers lost to go down 3-2, before winning all 3 games back home in LA, with Koufax starting Game 5 and pitching a complete game shutout with 10 strikeouts to put the Dodgers back up in the series. 3 days later, he started the winner-take-all Game 7 of the World Series.
On the mound, 1-1 in World Series play for 1965, Sandy Koufax. Strikeout. Strikeout. Struck him out. Strike 3. Mid-inning. 5 strikeouts for Koufax.
Oh, steady diet of fastballs, and Koufax records his
Number 3,
strikeout.
Thomas Yellowbrook.
Fastball got it. That's the pitch, strikeout number 8.
In anticipation of a possible series-winning celebration. But meanwhile, the man generally recognized as baseball's greatest pitcher, Sandy Koufax, in the last of the ninth. Kennedy, 1 out. Strike 3. Batty caught looking. He did it. Sandy Koufax gets his 10th strikeout, his 2nd consecutive shutout of the Twins.
I feel great, Betty. I know I don't have to go out there anymore for about 4 months.
Sandy, thank you so very much. You now go on back and sit down and relax a little while.
Thank you, Betty.
Sandy Koufax.
The MVP of the 1965 World Series was, in more ways than one, Sandy Koufax. Even after missing Game 1, he did his part and propelled the Dodgers to a championship. Truly, one of the best stories in Jewish American sports history. A series that made him not just a hero, but an icon to an entire community of people for generations on. What made this even crazier is that we now know he did all of this with an arm hanging on by a thread. He was likely pitching with a torn UCL in his left elbow, the injury that today gets treated by Tommy John surgery. The person who believes Koufax was pitching on a torn UCL is the literal inventor of Tommy John surgery. He suffered hemorrhaging in his elbow before the '65 season even started and was told by doctors he'd literally lose his left arm if he kept pitching at this rate. He led MLB in innings pitched in both 1965 and '66, by the way. It's been reported that by the start of the next season in 1966, Koufax complained of arm pain so severe that he would go numb at random times of the day, and couldn't consistently carry objects around his house without fear of him just spontaneously losing feel in his arm and dropping whatever he had in his hand. Understanding his health risks, and sick of the absolutely rigorous routine of arm care he'd have to go through twice a week on his pitching days, he decided 1966 would be his final season. In many respects, he was even better in that final season with his arm hanging on for dear life than he was in '65, when he already was the best who had ever done it. He pitched 1 game in the 1966 World Series for the Dodgers. One good but not great start in a series where the Dodgers lost all 4 games. He retired after that series, at just 30 years old. For as good as his Hall of Fame career was, albeit shortened by severe pain in his arm, it recontextualizes everything about the pitcher that he was. He dealt with constant adversity, physical and environmental. He faced anti-Semitic blowback despite being a hero to millions of Americans, inside and out of his own culture, transcending sports with his unwavering commitment to what he believed in. And yet, he still went out and delivered, better than anyone who had ever done it before him. Sandy Koufax is a hero, and the longer he lives to continue being recognized for that, the better.
Koufax to bench. Thank you, Sandy.